This week on What the Folklore is the Mokele-Mbembe Real. Is there a dinosaur roaming free in the forests of the Congo? Let's talk about it. So to get started, I want to talk about where this monster comes from. Now, I talked about this a little bit in my video about the loin, but the Lualaba River is one of the longest rivers in the Congo, and it flows right through the rainforest, running roughly north to south and emptying into the Atlantic Ocean. For hundreds of miles, it runs straight as an arrow through the thickest parts of the forest, and it is rarely more than a few miles wide. And so despite it being one of the longest rivers in the area, it's not particularly wide. There are rapids along its length, and because it cuts straight through the forest, it tends to be flanked by steep banks and cliffs. And so, to live along the Lualaba River was always something of a struggle, because it would be very difficult to fish in such a narrow river, and it would be easy for a person's field or crops to slide down the banks and into the river below. It's an unforgiving terrain. And so along that river, there grew a number of different tribes and peoples, and one of them were the Baka, who eventually came to call the river the Mokele-Mbembe. And the name means one that stops the flow. And it refers to the flooding of the river and the destruction of homes and fields and gardens that would happen every year. Now, for many years, the people along the river didn't just call it the Mokele-Mbembe. They also told stories of a monster that lived within the waters, a monster who was responsible for the flooding and for destroying their villages. And this monster would come to be called the Mokele-Mbembe. According to the villagers, the Mokele-Mbembe is a creature much like the Loch Ness monster. It is large, around 30 feet long. It has a long neck like a giraffe, though other witnesses say it is more like a snake than anything else. It has flippers instead of legs, and it is typically seen swimming just above the surface of the water. It has huge teeth and eyes, and can reach people easily if it wanted to. The first written account we have of this monster comes from a French missionary named Paul du Châtelet. He wrote about it in 1776. He wrote, "I have not thought it proper to enter into particular circumstances relating to fabulous and gigantic animals which the inhabitants of the interior provinces affirm they have seen, in which they denominate by the generic name of Sikkim Aluxor and Malamola. This name is given to a prodigious amphibious animal of a shape between that of a crocodile and a hippopotamus, but much larger than either of these animals. Its head resembles that of a horse. Its jaws are armed with very strong teeth, and its whole body is covered with scales. The animal makes itself known beforehand by a sort of detonation which it produces in the air. And it is said that it can change its shape at will, and that it frequently assumes that of a sleeping crocodile. However, this animal is extremely voracious and attacks every object which it meets, even stones and iron bars. It has been known to dash men and women into the air and swallow them. A great number of people are killed by these monsters annually. For the most part, Europeans pretty much ignored this story, and we wouldn't see much interest in the Mokele-Mbembe again until the late 1800s. When German animal merchant Karl Hagenbeck heard about the Mokele-Mbembe and wondered if it might be a type of dinosaur that had managed to survive extinction. Now, he spent a good deal of his life trying to find it, and he actually believed he did find some proof, namely footprints. But when he showed them to scientists, they ultimately concluded that the footprints looked nothing like any kind of dino. Footprints, and probably were, and even left by the mob Ambi. After this, the monster faded from view until the 1920s, when a man named Joseph Gillis began traveling the Congo and hearing more stories about the creature. Eventually, he decided to go look for it himself and began traveling up the Congo River to look for evidence of the beast. Gillis trekked through the forest, measured footprints, spoke to local villagers, and even reported seeing the creature himself, and he claimed to have seen a single eye peering at him from the water, a huge eye that was yellow in color. But by the end of his expedition, he wrote, "To our materialistic and skeptical friends, who, judging by European standards, deem all our experiences worthless, I wish to state that I myself am far from admitting that the Mokele exists. I merely wish to discover the truth. I am no more a believer than an unbeliever. I do not pretend to explain the contradictory stories. I confine myself to the simple statement that the problem remains unsolved." In 1930, a group of 3 scientists headed to the Congo to try and solve the mystery once and for all, but they too came up empty-handed. But perhaps the most compelling search for the Mokele-Mbembe took place in 1980. It was led by American explorer Herman Regusters. and he assembled a team of 120 men to comb the area near Lake Telly for evidence of the creature. They followed up on credible leads, conducted thorough searches, and even used helicopters in their hunt. He would later write, "We flew over the lake and swept it with binoculars for miles, searching the shores, the swampy areas, and the islands. We scanned the surface of the water for movement, looking for anything unusual. Even after all these years, the memory of that flight gives me goosebumps. Suddenly I saw something that made me gasp and my blood run cold. There it was, a monster, yes, but not like any monster I had ever seen. The beast rose up fully half of its height out of the lake. I saw its back, its hind legs, its sides, its tail, but not its head. It was dark gray in color and reminded me of a cross between an elephant and a whale, a humped-back sauropod. They continued their search and found giant footprints that appeared to be around 30 inches long, which matched up with the local descriptions of the creature. And while regusters never managed to kill and capture a specimen of the Mbembe, he was convinced he had found proof that the Mbembe was real. He would write, "The Mbembe is not a dragon, nor a dinosaur, nor a reptile. It is an amphibian. There are many of them. They live in Lake Telly, and they are descendants of primordial giants, relics of a forgotten past, mammals of the Jurassic period, and survivors of extinction." But even Reguster's expedition was unable to truly prove the Mbembe's existence. And so, the search continues. Even today, there are regular expeditions to find the Mbembe and investigate the claims of villagers. And even if they haven't found it, some researchers are still convinced it's out there. Ron Blomberg, a member of Reguster's original team, would write, "Even though we did not trap or shoot a Mokele-Mbembe, I believe the evidence we collected proves that it does exist. The question is, why is the Mokele-Mbembe important? Perhaps it's the romantic in me, but I love the idea that somewhere in our world there is a dinosaur that has somehow managed to survive. It seems like such a fantastical notion that it seems ridiculous, and yet we cannot discount the possibility entirely. Maybe there's a small population of sauropods hiding out in the Congo, or maybe the Mokele-Mbembe is an unknown species of animal, or a very large amphibian. There are definitely sightings of large creatures in the Congo, and these could be explained away as misidentifications of crocodiles, hippos, or elephants. But if these animals could really be so elusive, if they really could manage to hide themselves from people for decades, then it's hard to imagine how anyone could mistake them for something else. What do you think? Is the Mokele-Mbembe Real? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please hit that like button and consider subscribing. And I'll see you next time. Bye.